Joining me right now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and the author of Get Trump, as well as The War Against Jews. Alan Dershowitz is with us once again. Alan, good to see you. Thanks for weighing in here. Your reaction to this Colorado ruling?
It's clearly unconstitutional. The Constitution provides specifically for disqualification for people who fought in the Civil War. Now, Trump's old, but not old enough to have fought in the Civil War. It also leaves it to Congress to decide what this means, because it's very open-ended. If the Colorado court were to be correct, it would just basically amend the constitutional rules on impeachment. After all, insurrection is an impeachable offense. And if they were to impeach him under that provision, you'd need a vote of the House, 2/3 of the Senate. But the way the Colorado court, consisting of all Democrats, absurdly interpreted this provision, all you have to do is get anybody saying, well, I think what he did was an insurrection. What Black Lives Matter did was an insurrection. What Eugene V. Debs, who ran for president 100 years ago, did was an insurrection. There's no process. There's no procedure for how you decide it. Do you need a conviction? Do you need a vote of some kind by some legislative body? You can't just have a provision that's self-enforcing. And the provision itself says the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation this article, but they haven't done it. So there is nothing to this argument. It's just a political ploy. It is the most undemocratic decision imaginable, taking away the right to vote. Forget about Trump's right to run. It's your right to vote, because if this can be done in Colorado, it can be done in New York, it can be done in Florida, it can be done in purple states, and it will mean the election is determined by 7 judges or a dozen judges in different states rather than by the people of the United States. It's the most undemocratic, unconstitutional decision I've seen in a long time, and I think it's very clear the Supreme Court should reverse this quickly and put an end to this nonsense.
I mean, I know that very few people were expecting Trump to win Colorado, but doesn't this create a precedent for other states to come up with the same? I spoke with former Trump White House Associate Counsel May Mailman in the last hour. She says the only thing protecting Americans and democracy right now is the Supreme Court. Watch this.
This is about our democracy. When the Democrats say our democracy is at stake, it is, because they're trying to destroy it. What really this is about is the left has engaged in an unmitigated campaign against the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court right now is the only thing protecting Americans and our democracy before it crumbles.
So what do you think the timing is, Alan? Do you think the timing is going to be quick? Will the Supreme Court take it up? Will they make a decision quickly?
It has to, because the decision was stayed until early January. The ballots in Colorado are going to be printed fairly soon. So the Supreme Court will probably stay the decision immediately, then consider it over a period of time, and then render a decision. You know, even technically, and I hate to look at the Constitution technically, but even technically, the 14th Amendment provision doesn't apply to a president. It could have said, no person shall be a president, senator, or representative. It doesn't. Then it gives the oath of office, but it gives the senatorial and congressional oath of office, not the presidential oath of office. The presidential oath of office uses a different word than the other two, and that was the basis for the lower court decision. But this court swept all of that away and rendered this decision, first time in history. After all, Eugene V. Debs ran for president. He was an overt socialist who could have easily been found to have participated in insurrectionary activities. But nobody imagined that this would be used against a presidential candidate. This is just part of the Get Trump attempt to prevent him from running. Look, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I want to have the right to vote against Trump, just like you have the right to vote for Trump. And that right can't be denied us by a Colorado court or by a Michigan court or by any court. It's just not the way the Constitution operates. If Congress did this, that would present a very interesting constitutional issue. But without a Congress passing a statute setting out procedures, how many votes you need, After all, to remove a president, you need 2/3 of the Senate.
Yeah.
An almost impossible burden. Imagine that the framers of the 14th Amendment would say, oh, let's get an easy way around the impeachment and just say that anybody can make the claim that it's an insurrection and he won't be able to run for president.
Well, it's a good point. And you're going to hear it from both sides. I heard Dan Patrick on our air earlier. He's the deputy governor of Texas. And he said, well, maybe we should take Joe Biden's name off the ballot in Texas because of his dereliction of duty, allowing 8 to 10 million illegal migrants to flow into America and taxpayers footing the bill. Maybe he should be taken off the ballot in Texas. This is going to spike like wildfire. Already we heard from some of the candidates, Alan, Vivek Ramaswamy is pledging to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary altogether in solidarity unless the Supreme Court changes this. Now the Colorado GOP says it will cancel the primary if Trump can't be on the ballot. They are also talking about moving it to a caucus-like approach. What are your thoughts on what you're hearing from the GOP in Colorado?
Well, it's not surprising because what we're going to see is tit-for-tat retaliation by Republicans. Yes, they're going to take Biden off the ballot. They're going to do that. They're going to find some excuse for saying it's an insurrection, and they're going to fight back by eliminating the primary system or figuring out other ways. After all, the Constitution doesn't really set out a process for how electors are appointed. States have a great discretion in how they appoint electors. This will throw the entire system of electing president that we've now established for over 200 years into disarray. It's a scandal. It's a shame. The justices who wrote this decision ought to be ashamed of themselves. It's a purely partisan ploy, and the Supreme Court ought to take this up as soon as possible and get us back to the business of electing presidents based on what the people want, not what partisans want and what they can get partisan judges to enact, which clearly violates the explicit terms of the Constitution itself.
Yeah.
Look, the 14th Amendment was intended to prevent people who engaged in the Civil War from running. That's what the purpose was. If you look at the whole amendment, it talks about the Civil War, it talks about slavery. It's clearly in context a one-off. It wasn't designed to replace the impeachment provisions of the Constitution, as this court absurdly ruled.
Just stunning. It's truly stunning, Alan. Great to have your insights on this. Thank you, sir.